Why is it a good time now for a business to consider a podcast?
What the podcast allows you to do is build trust with your audience and build a much deeper connection.
30 minutes of good quality content could easily output 10, 12, 15 pieces of creative content that could be posted across all channels.
They kind of like almost align themselves with your values and beliefs.
A succinct, intentful content strategy around podcasting is actually quite cost effective. We're tapping into a different style. So where performance marketing and ad spend could be quite high, like cost per clicks can be quite high on certain sectors. This is utilizing the organic strategy. Okay. Hi, I'm Kev. Welcome back to the Podcast Foundry Podcast. This is where me and Pri get a chance to kind of talk through some of our ideas, why we are where we are, and maybe deep dive some more thought-provoking conversations to guide you, explain why we do the things the way we do them. I guess one of the big things that we need to talk about is why is it a good time now for a business to consider a podcast? The podcast industry, as we've discussed in other episodes, is booming and much more on an entertainment front than a B2B or an educational logic. So at the Podcast Foundry, we kind of thought, well, actually, it might not be merely the podcast, but what the podcast allows us to do in terms of secondary content, as we call it, which is taking that collateral and applying it to multiple streams. So that we can inform, build an audience, grow the digital footprint of a business through quite small requirements of the founders. But we just wanted to go through maybe some of those points. That makes sense, Pri?
Yeah, man. Perfect.
So, why should a business, as simple as it sounds, do a podcast?
I think the first one is being able to establish authority in your industry. There's this, kind of taking a little step back, I think sometimes you might think that the podcasting industry is almost saturated.
Yeah.
There's so many podcasts to choose from, to listen to, but I think in your niche, in your sector, you can establish authority by having a podcast, by doing solo conversation, solo to cam kind of pieces. I think that's the main.
Yeah. Authority is number one, right?
Yeah.
And actually, when we talk about podcasts publicly, we talk about what I deem as entertainment podcasts, right? But there are some examples of businesses, and not many actually, and why we think this is a good time to get involved. That are taking it to a direct B2B level, and we've got a case study for that later, don't we?
Yeah.
I think that is number one, and obviously with that comes brand awareness, as a standard. The more I say a lot, don't I? The more we talk about what we're doing as a business, if we were the client, and the more we explain our processes or our values, the easier it is for people to understand our brand. So it's all well and good saying, here's my brand guidelines, but that's not the same as a founder explaining their values or explaining the purpose of the SaaS product that they built, whether it's fintech or any old startup.
Yeah.
So, building brand awareness. What else?
Lead gentle.
Yes. Win-win.
Our favourite. It's a powerful lead generation tool. It's difficult to measure an ROI on lead generation through podcasting. You can't necessarily say, okay, cool, we've put out a podcast and 2 customers have come through because of the podcast.
It's an indirect lead gentle, right?
Exactly. Yeah. What the podcast allows you to do is build trust with your audience and build a much deeper connection. They almost have a chance to get to know you and get to understand the business, understand you as a founder, almost align themselves. They kind of almost align themselves with your values and beliefs, and therefore leading to...
Or they are aligned with them and they now realise it.
Yeah.
Right?
Even better. So I think...
And that's why I would say that long form is really important. So it's we talked about this in a previous episode in terms of how short form might not build the same level of community as long form. And this is prime example, which is, do you truly get to know someone in 60 seconds? Probably not. But if they've got 2 or 3 episodes that are 20, 30 minutes long, that kind of highlights, showcases them as individuals, thought leaders, founders, like management, then you feel like you've got to know them, like where it's them talking. And it might not be talking about themselves. I'm saying talking about like the vision of the business, or the sales process, right? Like long form allows that to be the case. It allows people to deep dive. And I guess that whole concept of lead gen goes down to warmth, right? You're coming in warm. You're not just, the minute someone goes, oh, I've seen that person's content, instantly they know who it is. It's recognizable. They understand their values, without you even having to like try and pitch them or try and sell them. And then you explain your product, you explain it. But part of that means that a lot of your sales staff's journeys of like or client acquisition journey is mitigated because they already know. They already know the product. They know the business. They know the direction. So then the sales staff have less to do, which is a win.
Yeah. It's like people don't like being sold to. So this is like a much softer approach almost without them even knowing, because they already then, like you said, they get to know your product, they get to know the business, and then, okay, cool, I need this. So yeah, it's a good one.
And I guess the final benefit is a succinct, like intentful content strategy around podcasting is actually quite cost effective, because we're tapping into a different style. So where performance marketing and ad spend could be quite high, like cost per clicks can be quite high on certain sectors, this is utilizing the organic strategy of engaging with people for free. And because podcasts are generally quite long, it means how much collateral we can get out of one piece of content is insane.
Yeah.
And we can prove that, right? 30 minutes of good quality content could easily output 10, 12, 15 pieces of creative content that could be posted across all channels, which means that actually the cost per piece of content is relatively low. And if you compare that, and we've done this like in terms of creating ads, etc., like they can get expensive. Like production isn't cheap. But let's be honest, this podcast, okay, the kit might be expensive, but that's just a overhead. So actually the cost of production is relatively low compared to kind of other ad spend.
And this podcast is an example, like what we're going to be turning this into. How many different pieces of content?
Oh God, so much, right? Like, and hopefully you've seen all of it, because we'll be chopping it up. But we take a lot of pride in that though, in terms of secondary content. I know, look, we live in a world of AI. Things have changed. You're like, oh, but I can do a podcast myself. Of course you could. I'm not going to say you can't. But a lot of people will say, oh yeah, there is this tool that you can put it in and it will find the 10 best clips from it. And they're pretty good. I'm not going to deny that. The algorithms are good. Large language models are understanding, but they don't understand context.
Yeah.
They don't understand your business vision, right? So they might not be picking out the bits that are right for you at that given moment. They're just picking out the bits that they use a term of virality, right? So you can ask ChatGPT, from this transcript, what's the most viral pieces? Pick them out and tell me the time codes. That's great. But is that truly what you need at that given moment? So I get it. We do it as a service. We take all that off you, but we take a lot of human interaction into that. So of course we use tools. We use tech. That's not a problem. We have to. That's what makes it cost effective. But at the same time, both of us are editors, and have worked in video edit. We know what we're picking out and why we're picking it out, and that has to align with the business.
Yeah.
And that means actually a content piece that you might have made in 2020, we look at it again now and go, actually now that's relevant, not that bit, and we can leverage that again. That content is relatively evergreen. Like once it's out there, it will always be out there. Now don't get me wrong, the business might change its strategy, change its direction, and then we'll remove it or change it. But a lot of the time when you're talking about long form content that defines values, products, etc., why would you change it? It lives on forever. It's not an ad that's got a fixed campaign length that's visible for like 2 to 6 weeks. So yeah, there's a length to it.
Yeah. So the one thing that gets thrown around a lot is like, it's important to build a community. It's important to build like, but for podcasting or for businesses in specifically, like, let's talk a little bit about why that's important.
I think the biggest thing is obviously building, like, the concept of building a community is through consistent online interaction. So it's funny, a lot of people define their social media and they create collateral content based on a large group of people looking at it. But if you invert that and say, I am a viewer, I feel like I'm the only person watching you, right? I'll watch whatever. I'll watch a Diary of a CEO and I'm not thinking, oh, there's hundreds of people watching this. I'm thinking about my engagement in it. And that's why community is so important, is because that individual feels connected to the content, not that content is being watched by millions, therefore I feel connected to it. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but that's why it's really important when we generate podcasts, when we produce these, that it is based on this concept that we should always keep in the back of our mind, that it's an individual watching it. You're trying to build a relationship with an individual, and they are building a relationship with you. Do you know what I mean? And
I think off the back of that, which is probably another point, is that once they find, like, if they find what you're doing or your product or your business useful, you almost have like an accidental brand ambassador. Because they'll be talking about...
they advocate, right?
Exactly, My mother-in-law is a perfect example, but she like religiously listens to Diary of a CEO on her journey to work, to and from work. And whatever she listens to, she'll feed back to us like, you need to listen to this, you need to listen to Diary of a CEO, you need to listen to this guy, and it's accidental brand ambassador.
No, absolutely. And I think that also means that the aftermath of production, right? Like when we distribute and that content goes live, we got to force or I guess coerce people into engaging with that content. And it's not, look, of course it helps the algorithm, it helps get the reach out there, but actually it's allowing us to understand what the audience are looking for, understand the questions that they want to be answered, because if we can answer those questions, then they're going to feel like they're part of the conversation, not just a viewer or voyeur of that conversation. That's like hyper important. A business is like, even for us, we are defining what Podcast Foundry is based on what we deem the requirements are of a client, right? But in time, as we do more and more of these, and this is fresh, this is new, like podcast agencies in this space don't exist. There's only a couple in the UK that we know of. There's a couple in the States. And we are, competitors, but we're also all breaking new ground because no one's looked at it from this lens. Because podcasting has always been, from perception, from past careers, it's like, we should do a podcast because internally, right? Like, because that will help us. And who better to guide the story than internal? And I completely agree. We will never be able to compete with the marketing department or your CMO in terms of where you want to take the business or the perception, the brand identity, the voice of that business. But actually, our not being in there means that we have a fresher perspective of what people envisage it to be, right? And what your business is perceived as right now versus where you want it to be perceived. And we can guide that journey. Do you know what I mean?
Because I think what tends to happen as founders, like, you think your business, you think your business, your idea, your product is the best out there. And then you think that you focusing on certain things is what people care about, but it might not necessarily be that. It might be something else that actually is important to them.
Absolutely. But that's why, like, that building of community is two ways, right? Like, we got to listen to what they want, as much as guide them through the content we generate. But if that means changing tact because there's a recurring question or there's a recurring point that's coming up in that, then let's engage with it. And the more they feel heard, the more loyal they feel to it because they feel part of that conversation, that community, right? They feel closer knit. And that's been proven in the last 10 years in terms of social growth, of social influencers, etc. Like, when they do something engagement wise, whether it's launch a new brand, launch some clothes, associate with a product, they fly because people aren't buying it because they want the thing that they've released. They just want to support the person that they trust.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it becomes a different... the sell becomes different, and that concept of lead generation is not actually lead generation. It's just more people that are reaching out to buy your product irrespectively.
Exactly.
You're not actually generating leads.
Yeah.
It's just warming people up to go, yeah, it's available here.
Yeah.
And there's loads of use cases in regards to actually quite young teens that have launched like clothing lines, but they've launched it based off the back of content generated. And the reason we always talk about content gen as opposed to podcasts is because content gen is the outcome of podcasts. Is that actually the podcast is only one string of the bow, and all of the other collateral we can generate from it, whether it's transcriptions, blogs, email shots, the list goes on, right? Like there is literally an undefined list of how much we can generate. I think LinkedIn will be an interesting one, especially in this space with thought leadership pieces, which not seem they do work well on there, right? If
Definitely.
we're being controversial, kind of putting our neck out and saying this is what I believe in, they can all be generated off the back of a podcast, which means that a founder's requirements, a business owner's requirements is to sit down for an hour, not to validate all these pieces of creative independently, right? Like, and do them all independently and invest in a team to do all of that.
It's done once and like multiplied by 10. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
As in like that same piece can almost be put into a Word document and put on Medium as an example.
Yeah.
So it's,
and like, you think about it this way, which is, we take a podcast, we transcribe it, and of course, let's not beat around the bush. This is all tech and AI that would help us get this process done. So we take this podcast, transcribe it, convert that into a blog post it on, which is obviously keyword enriched and SEO focused. Post that back onto your website, your company website, or on a third-party platform. You're getting natural SEO without actually investing time in blog writers or copywriters, research, etc. And all for what? Like, not to push it too hard, but you think about the investment point that we're talking about in Podcast Foundry. It's relatively negligible when you add together all of the outcomes that you would get.
Definitely.
And of course, the bottom line is people want to leverage something like this to improve their income, right? Get more leads in, get more money in, therefore justified. And as you alluded to, it's very difficult to see an ROI directly from this. It's not like an ad spend where we can see conversion rates, we can see click-through rates, and say, well, our cost of acquisition for that client was X, and their long-term value is Y, or lifetime value is Y. We can't see that, but that's not what a podcast should be deemed to be doing. It should be deemed to be improving brand awareness, improving reach, and we've spoken a lot about consumers and customers, but there's the whole talent talk.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah, of course.
And beyond that, investment talk, right? Like the more that people see of you, the more they're going to be comfortable giving you their hard-earned cash to invest against your business, right?
Yep.
And all in that same vein, their time, right? As a employee.
Yeah.
Like, talent's massively important in building a business.
It's the best way to bring the best talent in as well, to make sure that you're getting the best talent in.
Well, at least they get a sense of who you are. They're not coming in the arc, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, the last thing it's horrible to hear, but I've heard it a few times that people have joined a company that they've dreamt of working at, and then gone, I went what I was expecting, and they leave within 3 months. All that onboarding, all that talent acquisition time, the cost of it, recruiters, it's all gone down the drain. And maybe we can mitigate some of that with some clearly defined conversational content.
Yeah, so actually a really good example of this is 11FS. Now, they're in the fintech space. They started as a fintech podcast like many years ago. They've almost like grown with podcasting. So they started early. Now, it's not to say that if you're starting your podcast now, it's the wrong time. It's gone really dark. No. And that's not to say if you're starting your podcast now, that it's the wrong time. Not at all. But just using 11FS as an example, they've grown with podcasting. They have they've built like a really strong connection with their audience. Their viewership isn't exactly like, it's not sky high. It's not like Y Combinator, like we were saying, who've got like 3-4 million.
3.51 last time I
There
checked.
we go, exactly.
Sorry. Track these things.
So it's not like sky high, but they've become, anyone in the fintech space has heard or knows of 11FS. And so they've become the trusted people in the space. So when they talk about something like directly about any other products or services, fine, but also indirectly about like, I don't know, founder mindset or just, general stuff like that. They're just really good at it. It is probably something that we can maybe deep dive another time.
Yeah, no. And there's definitely some learnings from them. Like even from where I was looking, like their content's not actually that, it's not like cinematic. It's
No,
not
not
like
at all.
they've over-invested in the best of equipment. But evidently, equipment's not the solution. It's content, like the core of what you're discussing.
Yeah.
And they're very good at reacting and responding to comments. Like in my brief, like scanning of it, like being engaged in their community they're building.
Yeah.
That's hyper important. So, hey, definitely one.
Yeah.
But look, we've said a lot today. And obviously we've kind of described the benefits of it. Of a podcast for a business. That's our job. Podcast Foundry does that. We basically produce from concept all the way through to distribution and community management a podcast for a business. And that comes through, understanding your requirements, your needs and where you want it to be. And also hopefully you understanding our perspective, an outsider's perspective of how you're perceived and what your vision should look like. Or what your voice should look like to get you to where you need to be. So look, if you're interested in having a podcast with us and letting us look after it for you, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're available at podcastfoundry.co.uk. You can find a link there to book a call in with me and Pri, so you get to know us here and you get to know us there. But yeah, apart from that, thank you for listening again. We hope to see you guys soon. I've been Kev, and thanks.